Hello creative friends, this is Joy coming to you with another video on creating your own journal. This journal can be used as an art journal, or it can be used as just a regular journal to keep track of your day and take notes and whatever else that you would want to use a journal for. So here I'm marking out on this box, I think it's a cereal box, the size that this journal is going to be. And I believe this is 9 by 6.5 because I was using 12 by 12 paper. So I cut the 12 by 12 paper down 3 inches to make it so it's 9.5, tall, because you want a 1/2 inch on the top and a 1/2 inch on the side. So I cut the 12 by 12 paper down so that it was 9 inches tall, and of course when you fold it in half is 6 inches wide. So the paper itself will be 9 by 6. The cover will be 9.5 by 6.5. And here I'm cutting an extra piece that came off the other side of the box to reinforce my spine. I like to do that, just to make sure that the spine is strong and good and sturdy. And I leave tabs all the way around the box so that you can fold them over and it will reinforce the edges of the box. So here I put a scoring I don't know what you call it, but blade, I guess is what you call it, in my cutter, and I'm going around and scoring the tabs for the ones that I created. And as you can see, where the box will fold for the spine, which is the side of the box, I cut little V's so that when you fold over and secure those little flaps, then it doesn't interfere with the book opening and closing. So after I get here, I'm actually fixing it because I made a mistake and I actually cut on the line where I measured out that the edge of the book would be. So I'm just doing a quick repair job there, because after I started cutting I realized, oops, that's not where I'm supposed to cut. I'm supposed to cut at least 3 inches to the right of where my line was. And then here I'm going through and just marking where the two overlap and trimming so that it doesn't get too thick there in the corners. I want it to be able to lay flat on both sides, so then when I tape and glue this down, then it lays good and flat. And I'm just using a bone folder to score it really well. I want to make sure that when I glue those edges or those flaps down, that it's scored really well. So I have this tape, and this is like heavy duty industrial tape. It's called Tessa tape. My husband got it from work, and so it will stick anything to anything, and you have to kind of be careful with this tape because I've used it on other projects, and once it grabs a hold of something, there is no getting it off. And I have practically ruined projects with this tape because I wasn't careful, and it would stick or wrinkle a paper because it would just grab a hold of whatever I was trying to stick the paper down to, and yeah, it wasn't pretty. So anyway, it's double-sided tape, so I'm just taking off the other side. It's a red plastic piece, and then I'm using Aleene's tacky glue to go around the tape. So I want to make sure that this is good and secure, and then it's not going to come apart. And of course, I'm going to be covering this with paper. The last one I did, the little antique journal, was smaller, and I covered that with tissue paper and painted it and all that and did a different kind of cover. Well, this I'm just going to cover with some paper, and here I'm putting books on top just to let it dry. So here I took the piece of cardboard that I cut to reinforce my binding, and I'm just marking off where I want my holes. So I came in, it was 1/8 of an inch from each end, and then divided that in half between those two marks, and then divided each of those two marks in half again. And I'm cutting a piece of paper the length of my binding, but actually you'll see later on where this was a mistake. I should have made this piece of paper that I'm going to use for a template the length of the pages, not the binding. So it ends up being a little too long, but I fixed that here in the end. And so I'm connecting the dots here, and I also divide the length of it. I go 1/2 inch from the top, 1/2 inch from the bottom. Then I divide that in half, those two marks in half, and then divide the marks in half again. So that's how I figure out where my holes are going to be. And it doesn't really matter where the holes are going to be, as long as you're consistent to where you poke your holes in your binding and you poke your holes in your signatures so that they all line up. You really can put the holes wherever you want to put them, or as far apart as you want to put them, or as many holes as you want to put them. I could have done 3 holes instead of 5, but for this length of book I decided to do 5 holes. So I take my 12 by 12 paper and I cut 3 inches off because I'm going to make the pages 9 inches tall by 3 inches wide, which when you fold a 12 by 12 and a half, or I'm sorry, 6 inches wide. So when you fold the 12 by 12 in half, it's 6 inches wide, and then I'm making them so they're 9 inches tall. And I cut 3 pieces of pattern paper for each signature, so that would be 15 pieces of pattern paper. And then here I take sketch paper and I do the same. This is 18 by 12, so all I had to do is cut them in half, and that way I had 9 tall by 12, and I folded them in half and had them the exact size that I needed them. So I did 3 of these for each signature, so I did 15 pages of these as well. And then I alternated pattern paper with sketch paper for each signature, and I did 3 pattern papers and 3 sketch pieces of paper in each signature, so each signature had 6 pages times 5, so it ends up 30 pieces of paper times 2, which 60 pages by the time you're done. So this book actually has quite a few pages in it, and you've got lots of room to do whatever you want to do with it. So after I get all of my signatures together, I check to see how it's going to fit in the cover, and it looks like there's going to be plenty of room for pockets and tags and decorations or whatever you want to do with it. And with this book I didn't quite get that far because I was doing this as a test to see how long it was going to take me to put the book together, so that this could be a project to do at work during our little team building, and see how long it was going to take. And it actually worked out pretty good. And here I'm just putting down the spine on the book. And I made this book to take in to show my boss, say, okay, this is what I came up with, because I showed her the little antique journal I made, and she's like, oh my god, we got to do that. So I thought, well, we can't do all of that because that took a lot of time, so let me see what I can do that's more quick, I could do more quickly. So I did this, and she really liked the idea, so we all made books at work. It was a lot of fun. So here I decided what paper I want for the cover, and I overlapped and glued the 2 pieces together. And I don't know how I did this without measuring it, but it ended up where it was exactly the width of the spine, and so where the 2 pages overlap, it was right there on the edge of the spine, which was perfect. If you want to get it, do it like this and do it perfectly, the best thing would probably be to mark off how wide your spine is. So I am using a glue stick, but the glue stick that I use is a heavy bond glue stick, permanent, and it actually works really well. So I'm cutting tabs around this scrapbook paper like I did with the box to fold over the edges. And since this paper was, fairly thin paper, I was able just to use a glue stick, and that was good enough to hold it down. And like I said, this is a heavy bond glue stick. I wouldn't use a school glue because that stuff doesn't really stick that great. But this stuff does, does stick really well. And too, the reason why I wanted to try to, this is the first time I had used this glue stick. I was trying to, again, figure out how to put a book together, easily, quickly, and then, have where it's would dry quickly, and we could do it at work, because, you don't have a lot of time. We only had a couple hours, and I was like, are we going to be able to do this, within a couple hours? And I go over the outside with a credit card just to make sure it's smoothed out, it has good adhesion, and there's no air bubbles. So I was able to do this within hour and a half, 2 hours, put the basic book together. And here I'm poking the holes through the binding where I marked off and drew the lines. So where the lines cross, that's where you would poke your holes. And I wanted to poke the holes through before I folded over the tabs, because then I wouldn't be able to see my lines anymore. And plus I'm going to cover the inside of this book as well. So I will need to, once I cover the inside, be able to see where my holes are supposed to be. Now you can cover the inside and the outside of the book, and then draw your lines on your spine where you want the holes to be, and then poke your holes and erase the lines. I've done that before too. I mean, either way works, but I just ended up doing it this way. And when we did this at work, I decided not to do the sewn binding because I felt like it was going to take too much time, going to be too complicated, and so I ended up going with a different type of a binding. It was called a no-sew or an easy binding, where you wrap the string around the binding of your book, and then you tie it off really tight and then slip the signatures in the book. So I ended up doing that kind of a binding at work, and I used a little bit of gesso on the creases because I'm going to cut 3 pieces of paper to cover the inside of the book. Now you could just take one big piece and cover the inside of the book, and then you would just crease it really well in the crease of the fold. But I prefer to do it like this so that there's not extra material and paper getting in, interfering with the book opening and closing. At work, I just had them cut one big piece and just said, look, just cut a piece, a quarter of an inch or half an inch smaller, and just glue it down. And that worked out fine. And at the end of the video, I do kind of a really quick flip through, but not really. I mean, you'll see. I didn't get a chance to do any decorating on this book as far as pockets and tags and other decorations like I did with the little antique journal, because after taking it to work and showing my boss, and she was like, oh yeah, that looks like that'd be a fun project to do. One of the girls saw it and decided she wanted to buy the book, so I sold the book to her. But I did end up at least putting some pockets and tags in it for her. I believe she's not an art journaler, so she was going to use this for a writing journal. So I wanted to at least do that much with the book for her. So here you see I have the cover all covered up now, and I'm going back through those holes on the back side to poke through so that you could they'll be, poked through the paper that I glued on the spine on the inside. And I just used this piece of, I don't know what it is, it's some kind of piece of packing that I had gotten, and I hung on to, and it ended up that it comes in handy. It's always good to put something underneath when you're poking the holes, because you don't want to ruin your table or your mat. And so here you see where I realized, oops, made a mistake. This is not the size of my signatures. So I had to trim like 1/4 of an inch off at each end so that it would still be, or not 1/4, 1/8 of an inch off of each end, so that it would still be the correct length of my signatures, but the holes would still line up and not be off on my on the spine of my book. So I shaved off just a little bit on each end so that it would be the correct length of my signatures, and then remarked the top as T because I cut the T off. So I'm getting everything together using a paper clip, and then poking my holes where I have it marked on my template where the holes should be. And I did all of the signatures like that. So here I'm measuring out how much string I need, and I go twice the length of the spine for 5 signatures and then some. So because you need it twice the length of the spine, because you're going to go up and then back down when you sew it, and then with 5 signatures. Now you could have done this in sections and just did twice the length of the spine and then some, because you're going to sew off each section as you get them sewn. It's not going to be one continuous sewing, but I don't like threading needles. I have a hard time threading needles, so I just did it all in one. And whereas if you do it in sections, you don't have to try to pull all that threading through. So here I start in the middle, and I leave a little bit of string to use for tying off, and I go up to the next hole and through, and then up to the top hole and through, and then now I'm going back down, and I skip the middle and go to the next one underneath the middle hole, through that one, go down to the very bottom hole, back up, go back through the hole you just came through. And sometimes it's a little hard to get everything lined up and get it through, so you gotta you kind of got to work with it. And then back up through the middle. And when you come back up through the middle, you make sure that you're on the other side of the string, the middle string, than where that other piece is, and you just tie it off around that string that crosses the middle. And you make sure everything's good and tight. And that's basically how you do all of the signatures. So I get all of the signatures sewn in, and I'll show you here what the book looks like when it's done. So here's the book, and that's the binding, and that's the pages. Thank you for watching. I hope you guys try this sometime, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.